Hello, everyone. I'm Jane Tierney, and welcome to Purple Link's Dynamic Dialogue, a monthly webinar session that we offer for free for all supply chain practitioners. I'm going to turn my camera off now and go ahead and start the presentation. So today's topic is what's in store in 2024. And I wish I had a crystal ball because there's so many potential kinds of things and a lot of activity in the supply chain world in the various industries. But I'm going to take kind of a wide swipe at that and talk about some of the things that maybe you're hearing about and some of the things that I've collected from various pundits and various sources to see what's really in store for us in the supply chain world throughout 2024. If the pandemic taught us anything, it taught us that we don't know what we don't know. And so we're, working through this a day at a time, a week at a time, a month at a time. But it's nice to have groups of professional organizations that can help us and a lot of resources available that probably weren't available as readily pre-pandemic. So there are some bright spots there. So this is our monthly forum. As I said, we're going to continue through 2024 on the fourth Tuesday of the month at noon Pacific time. You can sign up and get the link and put that on your calendar, or you can just wait for our monthly reminders when we let people know that this is what we're doing. So we're all good to go through 2024. Same link that you use today will work throughout then. So let me just start and take a little step back and say, where are we today and what are the things that are going on? So we've seen some significant improvements since COVID downturn of 2022 in the supply chain world. A lot of industries have bounced back strong. We're not seeing near the shortages or the delays or there's as much teeth gnashing and hand wringing as we did the last couple of years. So that's good. Overall, we're seeing smoother operations, more balanced supply and demand, even though it still remains pretty volatile. We have a little bit better balance we're seeing in that today. Corporations have wisely incorporated a lot of the lessons learned from COVID. We're seeing a lot more companies do a lot more around contingency planning and getting ready for the what ifs and asking those questions. What are my risks and where is my next disruption coming from? What are the risks that we have? So we're seeing a lot of contingency planning, the just in case kind of things. We're seeing a lot of supply chains more flexible and more agile than they ever have been. We still have a long way to go in a lot of areas and a lot of companies, but at least we're looking about it, talking about it, and making efforts to be more flexible, to not be quite as knee-jerk reactions, but to be able to regroup and make changes as we see things change in the marketplace, in the world, and be agile and be able to move on and move forward and still continue to be successful in our businesses. We are seeing a lot more transparency across and throughout the entire supply chain. We have seen that visibility just open wide up. So many companies I talked to did not really pay attention to tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. Today, they know where all of those tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers are, who they are, and they're on the lookout for issues that might be arising somewhere in the globe, because so many of those suppliers are not in the same area as their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So whether it's a geography or a different part of the world or a completely different industry that you don't typically follow, companies are much more aware of that. So we have a lot more visibility and transparency. We've learned to communicate better, and we understand, I think, the value more than ever of collaboration and trying to make sure that we are working with our suppliers, not at odds with our suppliers. And we're really trying to bring all of that into clear strategies, clear plans, and share those across the supply base. We've seen a lot more digitalization. We've seen a lot more technology. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing. And still, there's a lot more to come, I think. And one of the big issues I'm seeing everywhere is sustainability. So we've got a lot going on in terms of sustainability, and companies are focused on that for now, for the upcoming year and 2 years. So we've got a lot of things there that are going to be moving through 2024. And we've seen companies really take a hard look at their supply chain architecture and their sourcing strategies. So I've said before that a lot of the architectures that are in place today were part of an evolution. They weren't very well planned. They weren't as deliberate as they might have been. They kind of, companies started outsourcing. So you went one direction, and then that led to another direction to outsource, and you outsourced a little more and did a few things differently. But now we're seeing companies take a hard look at, what is my architecture? What are my sourcing strategies? Where are my suppliers? And where do I need them to be, want them to be? And how am I going to use those sourcing strategies and the architecture of my supply chain to really help me get that flexibility, agility, and achieve my goals now in 2023 and 2024 and beyond? Because there's a lot of planning going on in terms of, now what are we going to do in 24? This is the time of year where every company puts their 2024 goals out and starts to say, okay, here's what we're doing. 2023 is almost done. We've only got a little bit more that we can do to affect that. So let's start putting a lot of energy into 2024. Traditionally, we have a lot of risks, and we're looking at those, and we still are looking at those. Weather is a big risk, and we've seen a lot of hurricanes the last couple of years. I live here in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area, and we had a hurricane, which was the first one in, I think, 60 some years. So that was kind of a different thing for us. Other parts of the country that typically get storms had some pretty severe storms. We're seeing some heat waves in some different parts of the country. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I've still got relatives there, so I keep an eye on that. And there's some pretty hot temperatures that came through this summer. I think it was one of the hottest summers on record in a lot of places, and a lot of storms. So again, I'm from the Midwest. That some of these storms in the summer end up in tornadoes, floods, and things like that. And we have all of that here in California. We have fires. We've had more fires in the last 5 or 6 years, worse fires than they've had in the history of keeping track of all of this. So we've had some really significant challenges to that. And we're going into the winter, which means we have the potential for snowstorms and ice storms and all of those things. We've got the recession, the economy. This has been an off and on thing all year. So my take on it is, to be or not to be. Are we going to have a recession? My own personal feeling is that I don't think it's going to be much worse than we've had so far. Not that we haven't had some inflation and some increasing prices and things like that, but it seems to be kind of leveling out, and actually prices are coming down in some areas. And that's a good thing. And there are indicators that say that that will continue. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't have omnipotent knowledge, but we're seeing some good indications in that area. A couple of years ago, cybersecurities were everywhere. Hacks, ransomware, a lot of data thefts. Not that this still isn't happening, but companies have really invested to shore up their security and make things safer for all of us who are living on the internet. Sometimes this is a little bit of a hassle. I recently have experienced a couple times when I was given somebody's contact information and asked to email them and do an introduction, or maybe send them like a follow-up from one of these events, to send them some slides, get them some additional information, and emails are bouncing, or they're getting caught in the spam filters. So sometimes they're outright rejected. Sometimes they just get caught in the spam and you have to go find them. And sometimes they're, who knows where they are. But we're seeing some good things from that we aren't having as many problems, but we're having problems the other way of trying to make sure that you do connect with the people that you want to connect with. We've seen a lot of strikes this year. This has been a big year for labor unrest. We had the automobile strikes, we had the SAG actor strike and the writer strike. Affected us a lot here in Southern California. The automobile strikes were a big deal and an issue. They took a different take on that, trying to negotiate with the three big companies all at once instead of individually. There's other issues around Amazon and Starbucks with unionizing and how that's moving forward. So there's still a lot of turmoil around that, and I think that's going to continue. So these are traditional things that we always think about. And then the geopolitical things. Typically, we think about Asia and Europe and what's going on there. So that's kind of where we are. We're looking at the things that we know, the things that are familiar. Okay, what's going to happen in 2024? But let's dig a little deeper, because there's some other things that maybe ought to be on the forefront of your mind. In the news today, I've got a list of 5 things here that are some of the things that they talk about in multiple articles, multiple webinars I've seen on. These are the topics for 2024. The first of those is artificial intelligence, AI. You can hardly pick up any kind of magazine or newspaper or look at any kind of internet news stream without seeing something about artificial intelligence on there. This is a great thing that can help streamline processes, optimize inventory management. It can really help overall efficiency of an organization. And yet many people know nothing about it, have no idea how to try to harness it or integrate it, or they look at it and they say, wow, that's way too expensive for me. So whereas I think that's something good to watch, I don't know that that's really going to be near and dear to the heart of many of us in the supply chain field who are dealing with more immediate type things and waiting for some of this technology to become more available, because these are not drop in, oh, let's go get the latest software for AI. It's not quite that simple. It takes a lot of understanding how to use that, as does the other two that I'm looking at, blockchain and the Internet of Things. Blockchain has a lot of potential, and it's been associated with cryptocurrency a lot, but it also has big implications for supply chain in transparency, security, traceability. These immutable records that get created are really something, because nothing ever gets erased. Corrections can be made, but you still see what the original entry was, what the transaction was. And this really does help minimize fraud and can help counterfeiting a lot, which is why it's been employed in the cryptocurrency part of the world. But it's also got a lot of other potentials with things like smart contracts that can really lower administration costs and really help build trust between the people in the network of that blockchain. So there's a lot of potential here, and there's ways to use that to do things like trace the products with a recall, or whether it's a food product or a car part or any number of other things. There's a lot of potential there. It's still a lot untapped. And again, it's one of these things that so many of the companies I talk to say, they ask me, what do you know about this? And do you know anybody that's actually using it? And so it's a real kind of ethereal thing at this point, but I think that we're going to get more insight into that, and we'll see more companies start to employ pieces of this throughout 2024. In the Internet of Things, it's a lot the same. Internet, we've got internet, all the time. Lord help us if the Wi-Fi goes down, right? If our router gets bad or our internet provider has a hiccup, we all rage and scream and yell. So the Internet of Things is really about helping us get more visibility into our supply chains. There's a lot of sensors and devices that are being used in order to read things and really get that visibility. Things like helping logistics routes get planned more efficiently around any kind of issue in roads. Here in California, we recently had a bridge that had a fire. They thought that was going to take many weeks to replace. As it turned out, they didn't have to replace it, which was a big blessing. And they were able to repair it pretty much in record time. So it's the I-10 is very close to the downtown area. It gets a lot of traffic every day, and it's back up and running, and that's barely a hiccup. But to when it was down, to plan routes around that, as I said, it went right through downtown LA, which gets a lot of traffic from a lot of different highways. And so to be able to do that in spite of the fires, the hurricanes, the mudslides, whatever else is going to happen, to be able to route things is very important going forward, and Internet of Things helps us do that. It also is very good at predictive analytics and helping companies identify potential risks, put mitigation strategies in place, and be a little more prepared to confront whatever is going to happen. So these are big things, and you hear about these three things a lot. There's two other things that I think are really important for 2024, and these are closer to home, I think, for many companies, because they can actually embrace these and start taking significant action in these areas in 2024, if they haven't already. And if they have, they can continue on that path into 2024. And the first of those is sustainability. This is really about eco-friendly practices. It's things like looking at alternative fuels, looking at, do you buy EV equipment? So are we buying electrical vehicles, or are we buying electric vehicles, or are we buying fossil fuels, or are we buying hybrids? And are we putting solar panels on the roof, or are we trying to tap into some other types of fuels that are available? So what are we doing in that area? And companies are making very specific actions and investments in this area for 2024. Renewable energy sources are a big focus of this. So companies are trying to look at their own carbon footprint, knowing that the government has some plans to start asking us to report on all of that as a corporation and as a business, that if you're doing that, what is your carbon footprint, and is it growing, is it shrinking, or how is that working? And that goes beyond the products and some of the processes into one of the big areas is packaging. And a lot of companies are re-looking at their packaging in terms of sustainability. And then there's a lot of promotion of recycling, repurposing, reusing activities and initiatives that's going on. So we want to not only be good corporate citizens today, but we want to take our products and make sure that there's a way that we can reclaim a lot of those materials, and again, not erode all the natural resources that we have for future generations. So companies are taking this, I think, more seriously than ever, and it's being broadly embraced by companies in no small part because it helps them enhance their brand reputation, and it helps customer loyalty. So if you have customers that are happy with you and you are embracing these practices, they are just as likely to stay with you, or more likely to stay with you, than they have been in the past. And that includes things like circular supply chains, which is an area that companies are looking at to say, what is a circular supply chain? I teach supply chain in a couple universities locally here in Los Angeles. And when we draw the supply chain, we almost always draw it in a line. We go from left to right, starting with like tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, ending up with a customer on the far right, and all of the activities in between. But now companies are looking at this, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's an easy way to look at it in a visual and step-by-step kind of thing. But now companies are looking at it in terms of circularity, which means we're just putting things back into the supply chain. So the idea is that you have no materials, no waste at all that go somewhere that doesn't have a home to be repurposed, reused, or to continue to gain value from, and not, again, deplete everything. So you're going to see a lot more circular supply chains, I think, in 2024. There was a study that was done in I think it was 2019, looking at companies and what their initiatives were for 2020. And many of the top, the Fortune 500 had initiatives around circular supply chains. Well, about March and April of that year, all of that got put to the back burner. And they said, no, now we just got to figure out how we're going to get through this COVID downturn. And I know for myself, I thought, well, we'll be through this I didn't think we'd be through it in a matter of weeks, but I figured by the end of 2020, we'd be well on the way to getting better and being through this. And lo and behold, it's almost 2024. And in March of 2024, we'll mark 4 years of that. Now, the COVID protocols have lessened greatly. There's still vaccines available. There's still outbreaks of that. I myself got it for the first time this fall. I think it was in the September, October kind of time frame. And it sucked. I do not want that again. So, but I think that we're looking at ways to move forward past that. And I think circular supply chains is one of those initiatives that's coming back now, almost 4 years later, that companies are saying, yes, we do want to invest in this. We do want to make this part of our plans to go forward in 2024 and beyond. The other really big initiative I still see is resilience, and that includes flexibility, agility, and really at the heart of it is risk management. So this is a lot more contingency planning, a lot more strategies, planning and looking and trying to anticipate, where's my next disruption coming from? Where is the biggest risk or gap in my organization? How do I close that and make all that work together? Companies are looking at their architecture, saying, okay, we might need to diversify. We have a lot of suppliers in China, so maybe we need to put them in other places as well. So do we try to move out of China? Do we just bring up another location? Do we keep the current supplier and ask them to use one of their other locations rather than solely putting all of the products in China? Or do we look for another supplier that has another capability in another part of the world? And then how do we split the volumes if we can do that? And if we don't have big enough volumes to do that, what are we trying to do going forward as we have new items to source, new products to launch? How are we going to create those supply chains? So there's a lot of diversification going on. A lot of companies are saying, how do I get some product made here in the United States and still maintain some of the volume suppliers, the less expensive benefits that I can get from doing business outside of the United States? So you're going to see a lot of this keep going into 2024. Inventory buffers. This is a really interesting area. The many companies got caught with the JIT syndrome and in 2020, and oh my gosh, I had 3 days of inventory. That was good until everybody shut down, and now I have nothing, and it's taking me forever to get back up. So rather than just starting to add back tons and tons of inventory, which many companies did, and they did that just prior to the pandemic as well, companies would say, oh yeah, let's get a month's worth of inventory or 2 months worth of inventory. So companies are really looking at this as a strategy and overall policies to manage that inventory. So where can I put the buffers, and how do I not have to own all of it all at the same time? The finance and accounting people in companies are really, really keenly aware of the inventory balances and really putting pressure on operations and supply chain people to be creative in how you create those buffers. We don't have to have all of the inventory at those safety stock levels. Can't we have the supplier hold some of that, or their supplier hold some of that? So if we can break that down and not have all of it in one place, then it's going to be better for us. Can we not get some of our distributors and retailers involved and maybe share the cost and holding and managing that, as well as the actually buying some of that a little bit in advance? So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. None of this happens without good supplier relationships. So in order to be more flexible and agile, you've got to have really good, strong working relationships with your key suppliers. And if you're going to keep your assurance of supply levels up and avoid those disruptions that make everybody crazy in supply chain, then you really need those relationships and to rely on your key suppliers. And again, be proactive, do some scenario planning, do some what ifs, put some mitigation strategies together. All of this, I'm seeing a lot more companies look at the what ifs and what might happen if we do this and what might happen if we don't do this, and really evaluating that as an organization cross-functionally to make sure they don't leave a lot of things out or get blindsided. And yet there are some really significant challenges. Here at home, some of the things that we're going to deal with in 2024, we've got an election year, November of next year, and there's going to be political turmoil like crazy all up until that point and probably past that. So if you think it's going to calm down, I would say think again. It's been ugly up till now, and it has the potential to get much uglier in any of a number of ways. So I think we just all need to be ready for what's going to happen in that line, because it's election years across the country. It's not only a presidential election year, but many states are picking new governors. Many, of course, all the representatives in the House of Representatives are up for election, either those that are looking to be reelected or those that want to be first time elected. So there's a lot going on there. And fully a third of the Senate is up for reelection. So, and we've seen a lot of politicians, incumbents that people expected to run again to try to be reelected, and many of them are dropping out. So there's going to be some churning around that, and that affects our supply chains because those are the lawmakers and they can hold things up. You know, we're looking at a potential shutdown. We've looked at that twice. We've stared it in the eye and we've missed it, but we have that opportunity again, or that threat again, in January and February. So there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot that can happen with the cash flow and people getting their wages held and contracts held up and lots of different things. The southern border continues to be an issue. Depending on who you ask at what time, you'll get all kinds of different stories, but it is not something that can be ignored. We have a homeless issue across the country, and housing costs are rising. I've seen many headlines that talk about young people not able to afford houses now. Depending on what part of the world you live in, the homelessness can be at a crisis mode or just a heavy nuisance, but there's a lot of issues around that. And there are no easy answers on that. I don't have the answers, and I greatly mistrust anybody who says I can fix that in 5 minutes, because it didn't take 5 minutes to get into that situation that we're in. But again, that affects a lot of supply chain, because there are housing products that we are making and moving through the country with the logistics and coming from external sources outside the US. So there's a lot of interweaving of all of this. We're seeing that there's a lot of foreign students who are fighting to come to the United States as that has been growing in recent years, but we're seeing a lot more of them leave after graduation. And those that stay or want to stay are facing stricter visa restrictions, and it's getting harder and harder to figure out, if you do want to stay here, how you can stay. I mentor a couple of students through different programs. Some are, I think all my mentees right now are students, but some are through like the ASCM organization and CSCMP, as well as the universities that I work with. And they're all looking at, what are my challenges and how can I do this, and what's the opportunity? And yet some of my clients are looking at, how can I hire these people? And the H-1B visas are very hard, very expensive to sponsor. So there's a lot of angst from both employers and prospective employees. And that's exacerbated because the unemployment is low right now, and there's jobs in demand. So people with students with supply chain experience are getting hired at good salaries. It's hard to find people that are experienced. There's lots and lots of high-level jobs that are available for people with supply chain experience, and middle manager jobs as well, and just experienced commodity managers, category managers, buyers, all of those kinds of things. There's a big demand for that. But finding people with the right skills is still a hard thing to match up. So it's not all that easy to make it all work. And then we're seeing things like strikes. So we've seen the auto strike this year, and other potential strikes. And then now we're looking at some domestic and offshore labor organizations potentially striking. But part of that is offset because wages are up. So the wages have been driven up by different things, different laws that were passed, and different measures to increase, like minimum wage, but that drives expenses too. So you might be making a higher wage, but expenses are going up, so you can't really feel that you're getting a raise. It's like you're still trying to catch up. So there's a lot of challenges there. And yet you'll see companies with record profits really making significant, all-time profits, and shareholders keep pushing for more of that. So we want to see how that's going to shake out, because we can't keep driving all of this up and up and up and not have that recession or a reset or whatever. Geopolitically, there's a couple of things that are going on that are really significant. The Russia-Ukraine activity, the Russia invasion continues. It impacts resources available from both Russia and the Ukraine in terms of sunflower oil and wheat primarily. Russia and Ukraine combined before the invasion to produce 30% of the world's wheat, but that is significantly down the last year and a half since they've been doing this, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. There's a lot of materials that are found in Russia and Ukraine, things like titanium, lithium, nickel, the neon gas come heavily from those areas, and that's been impacted, and that affects a lot of other industries as well. And then fuel like natural gas and oil that's comes from there. It's not as much effect on the United States, but Europe has felt that and will feel that again as we move into another winter. And then recently, of course, the Hamas attack on Israel and Israel's retaliation. This has been a really nail biter. It is very active, very hot right now, and it could expand and escalate even farther and to heights that I think no one wants to see. In case you don't know, Israel has the 27th largest GDP in the world, and their economy is considered number 20 in the most complex. So we might not think they're much of a player, but they are not insignificant either. Some of the top exports from Israel are diamonds, chips, the ICs, refined oil. So they get a lot of oil, they do the refining, and then they sell it and ship it out. And they do a lot of business in the medical and measuring instrument areas. 26% of Israeli exports go to the US, and which is about $17 billion a year. And then their next biggest export area is to China, which is about 5 billion. So 17 billion to the United States and across these industries and many others can be an impact. And it just shows that there is a big tie there. So economically, Israel is tied to both us and China and many other countries as well. So all of this weaves together into this very complex structure, and how we're going to make our decisions and move forward. We need to do this very carefully and deliberately. And then China. So we know how much business China has of the United States. Many, many companies have significant portions of their manufacturing in and or around China. And yet there are still some deteriorating relations with the US. So recently, Xi and Biden had a summit that got some pretty good press from that said that they were making some progress, but I think these relationships are still pretty tenuous. There's a lot of companies that are reshoring or considering reshoring and definitely looking at de-risking strategies. So these diversification type things, but it's not very simple to just pick up and move your factory out of China. So most of these factories are supported by subsidies and financing to the companies in China through the Chinese government. China has imposed its own tariffs, which is hurting companies and costing companies money in some areas. And so if you have a factory in China, if it's your suppliers, you can tell them to move the business. But if you have tools there, there are restrictions and there are penalties to pay if you want to try to move those tools out of China. So if you decided, let's move our factory that is in Shenzhen and we want to move it to Thailand, then there may be obstacles that say, no, you're not allowed to move those tools. Even though those tools are owned by your company, it may not be as easy as you think to just pick it up and move it, like it might be to pick it up and move it from Mexico to Costa Rica or Mexico back to the United States. So there's a lot of obstacles there, and China is prepared to and willing to throw more obstacles in the way to keep the businesses that they have, because it provides their economy, it feeds that economy. And then there's a lot of human rights issues still around China. I didn't mention the human rights issues with Israel and Hamas, but some of those things are horrific. When you see that these children have been held hostage, I think they said 4-year-old twins, and you see 8 and 12-year-old kids that have been held as hostage, you got to say, what's going on here? So human rights is a big deal. It is to us in the United States. It's part of our culture, and it's going to remain that way, I hope, and that we take action and make our decisions considering the human rights of all humans. So here's a couple things to watch, because we've been watching Israel and Hamas the last few weeks. We've been watching Ukraine and Russia for the last the last almost 2 years now. It's getting close to that. But there's a new alliance. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa have had an alliance for a while called the BRICS Alliance. They now are admitting Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. So there's an alliance there which could be very helpful to the world and to these countries, but we don't really know the impacts. And all of the things I read said, don't look for immediate effects, but keep an eye on this, because these are countries that aren't traditionally working together. This could work very well, or this could upend a lot of things. If you don't know, Argentina just had an election, and they have some challenges, as does Brazil in South America. And then, of course, we've been talking about Russia and China, but India, throw that into the mix. Now the most populous country in the world, India, they passed China earlier this year. South Africa, throw them in the mix with their gold and diamonds and finances available for that. So that's something to keep an eye on. Lead times are still long. For years, I said that lead times were pretty stable, but they are not. And they haven't been since COVID, and I don't think they will be for a while. So we've got some challenges going on there. Trucks are getting, freight is getting more expensive, and especially trucking. And there's not enough truckers to move everything, to drive the trucks, and the trucking is getting more expensive. So this is something to keep an eye on and look at alternates. We have an extensive rail system, but it's not perfect, and you can't move a lot of things across the United States. And there are places that are not close to rail lines that need the trucks. Even if you get a lot of things shipped, say from the port here in Los Angeles to Chicago or to New York, when it gets to that train station there, it still needs to be unloaded and trucked into other areas. So we got a lot going on there. Demand is still volatile. Companies still haven't figured out how to forecast this. We're seeing a lot of ups and downs. And there are manufacturing constraints related to people, again, hiring the right people, the right skills. for the right wages. Materials, because material availability is still spotty. Sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's not. And then equipment, because equipment is related to material and people as well. So all of that can be compounded. And then we've got as many or more environmental risks and natural disasters as we ever have. As I said, we got a hurricane here in California, first time in many, many years. So there are some good things, though, to look at. So what we're seeing for next year is rapid technology development. All those things I talked about, the Internet of Things, the blockchain, and the AI, there are a lot of people putting a lot of effort into that, to developing that technology, making it available, and deploying that throughout a lot of different industries and a lot of different supply chain. So even if your company can't do that, keep an eye on your customers, keep an eye on your competitors, keep an eye on if you have large suppliers, because they're all going to be able to do that more quickly, and they're going to make that available to their partners throughout the supply chain. A lot of focus still on demand forecasting and analytics in general. So one of the universities I teach at part-time is California State University at Northridge. In the last couple of years, they've added a whole major on business analytics. So you can now major in the business department in business analytics, not just systems information management like it used to be for a lot of years. And so this is an area that we expect to grow, and they think this is going to be a hot major for a while. So I always say data is not information, and we have so much data available today, but we need experienced people who are asking the right questions and can turn that data into information. Governments are continuing to shore up national supplies of critical materials. A lot of companies are involved in that and benefit from that, because there's so many things like masks and ventilators and personal protective equipment was blown out by the COVID pandemic. So now we're trying to replenish those. That's good for businesses. The government needs to have some of those stockpiles, and they're really looking at those critical materials. They're doing a lot of studies about where those are made and how they're going to get those, and how we're going to be able to react quickly again if we have another issue. But we still live in a world that's very much VUCA. We still have a lot of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So we know better how to handle that, but we still have a lot of challenges there. We do see a lot of companies making big investments in their supply chains, though. This is not a bad time to be a supply chain professional, because one of the first times companies really recognize the supply chain function as, oh, you're a little more than ops and you're not just part of finance. So they really see the supply chain as making a contribution, serious contribution to the company's success. And I see that reflected in a lot of ways from the hiring, and I see the salaries going up for senior level executives, senior directors, VPs, and a lot more CPOs that are being put in place to manage that whole thing. And so the jobs are available. The outlook for that continues to be strong. There are people coming out of schools, but they don't have the experience. They do have good training and good fundamentals, but there's still a big gap between getting people to get the right amount of experience and still be able to look at things strategically and handle some of those jobs. Sustainability is a big deal, because now we, again, have a lot of pressures from a lot of internal and external areas, but we need time to see that these activities are actually working. But these initial indicators are pretty good that the things we're doing is helping to reduce the amount of waste that we have as a world. But, the United States is just one small piece of this planet, and there's a lot of other opportunity across the globe to do better with sustainability. Economists are now saying the risk of a recession is really low, little minor inflation, depending on how you look at it. Minor, in my pocket, it's not so minor. And if it's in your pocket, I might assess it as minor. but there's still issues there, and there's still a lot of risk. Companies have strengthened their relationships and now can build on those, and that's helping a lot of companies out more than they expected. We're seeing that flexibility has been greatly improved. Companies are more agile, more flexible. There's less knee jerking, but there's still a long way to go there. And overall, I think people have a heightened awareness of risk and the potential and the impacts from that. And they're trying to make sure that we build our companies with that resilience and that risk awareness in place. So there's a lot of training, there's a lot of growing those skills so that people know how to think like that, know how to make decisions based on risk. So 2024 is going to be a roller coaster. Like I say, I have no crystal balls, but there's a lot going on, and we're having to kind of juggle a lot and keep our eyes on a number of different horizon areas. So it's going to be a roller coaster. But that's what I have for Dynamic Dialogue. Thank you all. This has been a great year. We'll resume on the fourth Tuesday in January, which is going to be January 23rd. And my plan right now is to talk about Ukraine and Israel issues with the fighting that's going on there. That's subject to change because that's quite a few weeks away, and a lot can happen between now and then. As a reminder, we're starting a CPSM class. It's online. It starts on January 16th. It's going to be on Tuesdays from 6 to 7:30 Pacific time. If you're interested, I have a few signed up. I'd love to have a few more. And if you want to join from another time zone, if I can get like 3 people from, say, the East Coast, I'll put in another class and do it a little bit earlier so that you're not coming in from at 9 to 10:30 at night, which sometimes is more than I can handle. You can check out our website, although it's woefully outdated. It needs to be updated. That's one of my things to do. Or you can contact me directly always at jane@purplelink.net. And I usually leave you some little thing to think about. Today, I'm just going to say happy holidays to everyone. I hope everyone has good and safe holidays, and I wish everyone a very happy and successful 2024.
Happy holidays to you too, Jane. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.